infuriating, and I got infuriated in your paper when you were talking about how little words like top, you know, that it's like a way of trying to cut off the homosexual dick, you know, and it just really angers me.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's disgusting. And it's great that you can have that reaction. Shows you're not dead yet. Good for you.
Well, the part I wanted to really ask you about is this idea of the relationship, the homosexual relationship with the feminine. That's a piece that when I first read it, I struggled with it weeks and months trying to sort of overlay it onto my own internalized view of my own internalized homophobia, I think, you know, myself as somehow straight, which I hadn't seen until I tried to superimpose what I was reading from the paper, and then I finally realized, wait, this can't be superimposed. There's not the same arrangement. And so what I appreciated then at the time, and talking to Chris about it, was that there was a way of looking at the feminine as this ally. I know you said you don't like the word aid, but even tonight it seemed deeper to me that there's it's more like a conditioning, sort of or a preparatory force to allow a gay person to be receptive to a divine insemination. Is that sort of on track, or
on track about what?
Is that what you're getting at in terms of a gay relationship to the feminine? That's how the feminine operates, is to prepare one to be receptive, or am I off from?
Picture receptivity itself. Picture receptivity as an action, as a thing that's happening, rather than a thing. Okay. Now imagine that thing that's happening, called receptivity, is a feminine being. Whereas if we were to personify it, which we're not, it's itself, but it has a kind of intelligence or personality, you might picture this female being within it. Okay, it's not there's no literal female being. Okay, it's a kind of tone and attitude and stance and way of engaging, perhaps. Describe it in different kinds of ways. My thinking has developed quite a bit. It's intriguing that that would puzzle you, because I think that would puzzle anyone. Especially a guy trying to figure out, hey, he could be feminine as well as masculine. I think it's great to learn to figure that out. I think we have a natural talent, homosexuals. Very much so. We were born into a special, it's called a special relationship with the female value. Because unlike straight men, we don't hunger for what feels missing in us around that through some literalized valuation of that feminine quality. And thus we're set up, by virtue of being homo-organized, to have this feeling, regard vis-a-vis this feminine that's different, whatever that's going to be. It's different than seeing this actual woman, and now it's embodied by the actual woman in this way to get this going in that particular way straight guys do. This is something else. I'm not to say that straight guys don't also experience the receptive quality in this female quality, with this female aspect to it that I've been named to you. Okay? Let's go to a simpler idea here. As you experience yourself, okay? Let's imagine that the things which you are experiencing occur within a modality that I'm calling here experience. Let's imagine that the modality called here experience, which contains what happens within it, is a female being. By analogy, then we could call what happens within it a male being. Though I wouldn't want to go with that too hard, because I would be interested here in the feeling of the female presence as an archetypal valuation in a process, not a thing again. So I'm looking now at a view of reality in which everything is both male and female simultaneously, and other qualities too. It doesn't exhaust everything. It's a way of grasping things, or a way of engaging things, to consider them as male in some ways or aspects, and as female in some ways or aspects. The usefulness I find in considering reality in these terms as male and female, there are other dualistic oppositions which could be used, is that it highlights the underlying motif of the sacred marriage, that is the sacred union of the opposites, of the divine opposites, which is an underlying theme of the manifestation of opposites. Okay, that the implication by virtue of existing opposites, that there is also a sacred union around that theme of the split opposites. if the opposites were not split, by the way, there'd be no powering of the inner world, just like there'd be no powering of physical existence. But unless the opposites get split into two camps which could work, push and pull with each other. One might look at male and females and particularly describe that push and pull, the labels to describe that push and pull. Again, not to be confused with what people think of as gender, or you think of men and women in that sense. It's different, or something else. Again, to get into the field, it's a very interesting topic. So, in a way, Jung's psychology is a psychology of soul making. There's the making of soul, which is not meant so much as a purposeful process, as a co-purposeful process one does with one's psyche. This is a kind of intercourse with oneself, which generates a kind of self-productivity. This requires both, so to speak, a male fecund quality and a female fecund quality. So we're talking about this engagement of those two aspects with oneself, which is the more dynamic and which is the more, it's called put upon, I don't know the word receptive again, confusing. Put upon aspect and flip around from the male to the female with this. Against some very esoteric errors if we were in traditional spiritual traditions of the more serious type, we'd be into high levels of initiatory practice with this mystique of what is the meaningfulness of something that simply starts out as what's the feminine. And you're asking that. And it's a symbol. This to me is the mystical. We might start out, if we were in the Hellenistic period, you might say, oh, you reference Sophia. You say the feminine, say Sophia, for example. The Lady of Wisdom, the archetypal figure who knows herb stuff. So here we have not only then the female as any old kind of way of holding and gestating, but perhaps then the female as holding and gestating supreme intelligence. Picture Tara, if we were into Tibetan Buddhism. Analogous figure, highly analogous figure, a teacher of knowledge, Tara is. But again, these are personifications of qualities which are not themselves people. When the Tibetan system, you see the paintings and stuff like that, the statues, they represent personifications of qualities in the mind, they don't represent literal deities. Yeah. And in that system, it's a quasi-psychological system, Buddhism. So perhaps addresses your concern there. It's a fascinating question.
That's helpful, because as opposed to the figures which concretize it in my mind, yeah, it becomes, I can try to reframe or reinterpret as that feeling, ongoing feeling process, that dynamic.
In terms of, if you would like to concretize the matter a little bit more, you might picture that the human psyche has within it a certain dimension which is incestuously related to the fact that we're born from our parents. We develop relations with each of our parents as we grow up. That in Jungian, classical Jungian terms are called the parent complexes, the father and the mother. You might figure that each of them produces a child through development of our genital interest, physiologically. A child of the one is, we might call the double. The child of the other is the contrasexual figure, the anima or the animal. So when I picture that every side of them has kind of a family foursome. That entire family foursome, in my opinion, is involved in all kinds of positions that the mind develops, such as the position of personal identity called the ego, the position of desire, and what we call sexual orientation. Okay? So I picture sexual orientation as involving just one figure. Okay? So for example, one way of picturing if you feel hot for some guy is that the hot that you feel is as female. I don't know what to call it, the fire and the heat is male, okay? But the feeling of it is female, as you feel it. And the two are fucking each other. Okay? Meditate on that for a while.
I'll take some time with that.
Okay, so I hope that addressed your question a little bit, Kama. It's a delightful concern. Let's see how that one develops. I'm sure that your interest augurs very intriguingly for further stuff in that direction. I sense it. Interesting. Okay, other reactions or questions?
My name is Matt, and I too am feeling afraid speaking here, and even though we've had conversations in the past, shockingly, I'm still afraid. And I'm angry that I'm still afraid. I remember reading this article first when I was preparing my own dissertation, and what a turn on it was for me at that time, and I was even blinder than I am now. But it was really like a little spark in the darkness. And I'm struck by, and we'll get to a question in a minute, but I'm struck by the idea of a homosexual libido and the intelligence within it, and grateful that somehow, despite my own violence and the societal violence and my own internalized version of that intelligence doesn't seem to be destroyed. It persists nevertheless, and it can resonate with you even tonight.
Right on.
It's really extraordinary.
Oh, right
It's
on.
really extraordinary. So I'm grateful to at least even appreciate that.
Okay.
The question where I'm getting hung up, and I feel like this is just my own inferior thinking happening, but maybe it's just worth sharing, is the idea of individuation as gay.
Yes.
And it feels like it's such a radical move
Sure.
around what it means to identify as gay, because it really, if I'm hearing you at all correctly, and I appreciate clarification, but to identify as gay means to participate in the process of individuation.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And then there's another confusion, but it's a little less interesting.
What's the confusion?
Which is that it seems like all individuation is a gay process itself, whether one is heterosexual or not. That's kind of what I'm also hearing. And
How do you see that?
Well, in the paper you say heterosexual as gay. That's what Jung has taken up, and you're looking at homosexuality as gay. But
what was that?
in the paper,
Yes.
if I read it correctly, you were
Yes.
saying that Jung takes up the idea that of heterosexuality as gay,
I don't say
or
that.
heterosexual as gay.
No, I don't say that.
No?
No.
Did I mishear you? Did I hallucinate that? Okay, I'm listening now.
Okay.
I thought you were sort of addressing the idea that at least that there's a heterosexual slant on the idea of individuation generally.
That's Jung's basic
That's
thesis.
Jung's basic thesis.
Yes.
But you're turning that on its ear, I think, and saying that
Right.
actually, if anything, there's a homosexual slant on the idea of individuation.
I'm saying that, yes.
Whether it's heterosexual, whether a person is heterosexually identified or not, and I just kind of wonder.
Well, certainly you could observe a heterosexual process from a homosexual point of view, sure. That's one of the comments that I just made about breeder ideology come from a homosexual attitude towards that. Someone could certainly comment on something from a homosexual point of view. And that certainly could include heterosexuality.
So then it also seems that the defense against individuation is sort of at the heart of homophobia. If I'm attacking my own ability to individuate, or my own resistance, or violence against the idea of individuation itself, is one manifestation of homophobia.
Well, in that you are coming out of an organic desire to be homosexual. If you don't support your own individuation, that is terribly homophobic. Absolutely. Profoundly homophobic. I would claim that most of gay culture is, in that sense, profoundly homophobic. It's constantly concerned with thwarted gay individuation. That's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. It should be denounced at every opportunity. So, thank you for mentioning that. Does that maybe clarify that?
Yes.